All right, Shaquana, I'm so happy that you are here with us today. We're excited to really talk about prevention and preservation when it comes to Black families. How do we prevent them from getting open CPS cases, or if they've ever had them, how do we help preserve the family so they don't get another case? And you, just as a former social worker in our community, you have so much value to add. So we're really excited just to get into this conversation and really be leaving here. I think that when people listen to this episode, especially families, which is, mainly who we're targeting, I think that they will leave here with some really good tips so that they will not be in that situation. Or if they're in it, some great tips of what to do. And so I'm excited about that. But even for the social workers who listen, who are currently working with Black families, I'm also hoping that we'll be able to add some value to them as well. So I'm excited for today's episode. Welcome to Divine Conversations Podcast, a space where faith meets real life and community stories lead the way. We're here to lift up the voices of BIPOC families navigating housing, healing, mental health, and so much more. Whether you're a parent, a provider, or someone walking alongside our communities, you belong here. Each episode, we share honest conversations, resources, and real stories of resilience. Together, we're creating a space for healing, hope, and divine conversations, where healing begins and stories rise. So, Shaquana, tell us in 1 minute who you are that pertains to this interview today. And I know it's because you're so much, you do so many things, you have so many titles. But when it comes to this episode today and the value that you're about to just add to us, tell us about yourself.
Well, first of all, I am a mother. I am a mother first. I am a grandmother first. I am a wife. But I also have a master's degree in social work that I obtained from UMD here in Duluth community. I got my undergrad at UWS with Liz Blue. And I am a previous social worker with South St. Louis County for many years. And many for me is more than 5. So if people are like, you weren't there 20 years, I wasn't.
It was 5.
It was 5.
All right. Well, let's just jump right in. Let's start out with what actually triggers a CPS case for being open?
Legally?
Legally.
Oh, okay. Poverty. Let's talk about it. Y'all want me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Poverty triggers it in this community, especially for African American families or family who identify as Black. Our community will see Black children playing outside and feel as though they've been abandoned and will call and make a case. That doesn't automatically say that a case is going to be open, but it does say it will get screened. And so eyes on Black families is the beginning of an open case eventually, right? Because as soon as a report is made on a family, that case don't go away just because it's screened out. It becomes a pad. A file is then opened up. And if too many cases is reported in a certain amount of time, eventually a case will be opened. Even if it's all been screened out. 10 have been screened out. Let's say they get 10 calls on a family. 10 have been screened out, but that 11th call says there is smoke. And where there is smoke, there is fire. So they must do something.
And you're talking mandated reports.
Yeah, I'm talking about mandate reports. I'm talking neighbors
Got it.
who are concerned. We're talking about haters,
Yeah.
right? People like to use social services as a weapon against their haters, not knowing what they're doing. I mean, and sometimes they do know what they're doing, but it pads the case even if there's nothing really truly there.
And I just want to clarify that when we say CPS, we're talking about Child Protection Services.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes from other agencies, how are those triggered?
Mandate reporting, right? There's a level of mandating reporting that has to happen that the state of Minnesota has a statute on. Other agencies are trained on what their agency considered to be mandate reporting by the state law. And as so long as our biases are not getting in the way, mandate reporting should be black and white. You make a report, there's no concerns, but often biases get in the way, and we can't ignore that. Do we want to believe professionals are making reports based off of true concern of a child? Yes, but true concern is also rooted in biases. If a child is not walking in your office with bruises on them, if they haven't walked in your office and made a report to you or made a statement to you, everything else is going to include your own bias and your own thoughts and concerns based on what you are seeing. And we all know, because we're parents in this room, I myself had a child protection case. My son, 6 months after I got my job full time, said he checked himself into, at the time, and I'm not sure if it's still there, but at the time, the shelter for kids
Mhm.
had a program, a 21-day program where a kid can check themselves
Yeah.
in there if they, felt unsafe, they didn't want to sleep outside. And I was working as a child protection social worker. My dear, lovely son went to the police and told them, I am being abused at home with an unknown object that don't leave bruises. I made the mistake of teaching him that because I wanted him to know. I wanted him to be aware. I want my kids to have the knowledge. And the officer called me. It was a Thursday. I was sitting with my other children eating dinner, looking at the clock because they didn't have cell phones at the time. Like, where is this kid at? And he's like, your son is, in this program. And he said the exact words of
Mm.
he's being abused at home with an unknown object that doesn't leave bruises. He's like, he's pretty dang smart. I said, unfortunately, I read to him as a kid. I'm fine. He'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that triggered a case, right? And because I worked at St. Louis County at the time, Carlton County had to come in and actually do the evaluation. And when it came down to it, he was upset that he couldn't get his hair dyed, and I wasn't getting his nose pierced at 10, 12 years old.
Yeah.
That triggered a case.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so there's that.
Okay.
How much power does a social worker really have when it comes to what goes on within a CPS case?
They have all the power. Families don't choose. Let's be very clear. We should be partnering with families.
Mhm.
However, we have rules and laws that govern social workers that come from the state. There's a certain timeline. So while families are busy being angry, mad, and pissed off, as they have the right to be, excuse my
Yeah.
French, as they have the right to be, because it is a very high emotional state to have an open CPS case, even if your children have not been removed.
Mhm.
A social worker knocking on your door to tell you that they have concerns about your ability to control your body, yourself, your emotions, your children, and your finances. It is a punch to the throat
Yeah.
as a parent,
Yeah.
and especially on Black bodies, because again, unfortunately, our society says Black bodies can't manage their bodies, their hair, their kids,
Mhm.
their money. They can't control anything,
Yeah.
so therefore we have a system to control us, and we are spinning out of control because we are tired of being controlled.
Yep.
Sorry, did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
I think I had a more honed in question just about placement too, because I think a lot of families feel that
They
they
don't
have
have
a right.
control. No.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
so let's say, and this is in most counties, but once the county has custody of your children, that means you have no rights of your children, your thoughts, your belief, your values. They can take those things into account, but the state has already given them 12 things, 12 items that they have to look at and advocate for why they are choosing the placement they are choosing. The reality is sometimes we have to choose what is easiest and what is quickest for the safety of the children, as well as for keeping things moving. So they may start off in a shelter and they'll work through finding a different placement with family and things of that nature. But the social worker is in complete control of that.
Mhm.
A family can say, hey, I have an aunt, I have a cousin, I have a brother, I have a neighbor. They can say those things. That's more work for the social worker.
Mm.
So once your kid is placed with a family member, be grateful and shut up.
Mhm. Yep.
And understand that your role in that situation is to support that family member caring for that child.
Yeah.
Unless your family member is causing more harm, close your mouth
Mhm.
and focus on what you need to get done. And it's not a
Yeah.
vacation. 365 days go faster than one day when a child is in placement. And that count does not
Yeah.
start over once your kid is back in your care. That's 365 days in their lifetime. If you think 5 years is short with infib, imagine 365 days that your kid can be out of your care. Meaning St. Louis County or any agency or any state is financially is responsible for your child. Those hours, those days don't start over. So let's say you get your kid home at 300 days. They've been in care. You get your kid home 301 day,
Mhm.
right? But the rest of their life, you only get 64 days.
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
For the rest
Wow.
of their life. So when we have families who children have been placed and then they come back into their home and then they go back into the system, the count don't start over. It is start over and say, okay, this placement, this time they've only been in care for 14 days. However, the total amount of days that they have been in care has been 301 plus this
Mhm.
14 days. So that's when we see when families have that recidivism of their children going back into care, the case is no longer just a child protection case. It can become immediately a termination of rights.
Because of the number of days, because of the
Because of
history.
that. It could easily become a transfer of custody because of the number of days, because of the severity of why a child has been put into placement. And families need to truly understand that, get out of their emotions and get busy if they truly want to be a parent. And again, we have to hold ourselves accountable. If you know you are not the best person for your child, don't let societal norms convince you to put your children back in harm's way in your care. Shut up, be honest, and give those kids to somebody who can truly take care of them and allow for you to
Mhm.
have a relationship with them. But don't let societal norms kill your kid.
Right.
Because we have babies dying because parents and mothers have this notion of, I'm supposed to be a mom, I'm supposed to show up, but your mental health is whooping your tail. And in the end, only thing you're doing is bleeding on your
Mhm.
baby. And that ain't fair either. And that ain't the social worker's fault either.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
You
thank you.
no, I think what I see more is when it comes to family placements is that it's really hard to get that.
Mhm.
Like I'm in these meetings and they're naming family members, and for whatever reason, because a family member have a background or whatever, they can't do it, or it just seems like it's always a reason why this child can't go to the families. And then the other thing that I see that the families that probably could qualify don't want to do it because they don't want CPS in their house. Because especially when it comes to black families, there's been so many situations where then they get a case or their child, teenagers in their house get a case, or they so just to open their selves up to that. And I think that's what makes it so hard being in a community where a lot of people are transit. So the
Mhm.
majority of their family is not here,
Mhm.
and so you give the list of the people that are willing
Mhm.
and that can, but it just seems to a lot of the times it just don't work out. Can you talk to that? Like what
Yes,
is
it would
the
be
the criteria? It's like
what
there's always
yeah,
they
the
can't meet the
criteria. I can talk
criteria.
to the criteria, but I can tell you that there's so many possibilities of why a child can't be with a relative, right? I'll say this. Let's say, Deanna, you have my kids in your home. You're no longer just a family member. You're now a facility. There's money involved.
Mm.
Mm,
So if you haven't, let's say my kids are in your care, and a case comes open on you while my kids is in your care, you're not just going to be investigated as another family. You're going to be investigated as a facility.
mm,
That means your license is at risk. Not only is your kids at risk, your license is at risk, which means that let's say another family needs you in 5 years. You only have my kid for 2 weeks. They
right.
do they do an investigation on you. They decide, okay, this isn't working. Then, whatever, you now have a ding on you. Again, we cannot move away from the reality of there are biases of why families cannot do it. And then there's the truth of some families are saying, I don't want to do it.
Right.
Right.
I don't want to do it because first of all, it's too much work. And I
Mhm.
don't trust that they're going to come get their kids. And I don't know how long it's going to be. And I don't
Mhm.
want to disrupt my own household
Yeah.
because it's a lot of work. You got appointments, you have therapy, you have
Mhm.
doctor's appointments,
Mhm.
you have visits, you have It's just a lot of work, and if you don't have the financial resources and the income for your own household, if you don't have a
Mhm.
padding ready, if you don't have childcare, if you don't have other family members that can be there to support you, who really wants to open themselves up
Right.
for that except for somebody who is willing to?
Right.
That's number 1. DHS is in control. I tell people all the time, you don't have to get licensed by St. Louis County. You can go get licensed by a
Yeah.
private agency.
Right.
And my rule of thumb is when I worked as a child protection social worker, which I know there are plenty of people in that agency who were very annoyed with me, is let DHS do their job because
Mhm.
social workers don't get to say no. DHS says no. We simply, the department that does that paperwork, they do the paperwork, but the answer come from DHS. If DHS says no, they have to give you a criteria of why they said no and what you can do to appeal.
Mm.
Now, if the social worker does a preliminary check and they're like, oh, this isn't going to pass, that family member still has the right to go and get licensed, or at least go through the process to get licensed and let DHS say no. You have to have a social worker that's willing to say, yeah, DHS says no, but I have reason to believe that this is a safe home. I have plenty of examples where I was a social worker and DHS was like, no. And I said, oh, but I got like how many more days for this appeal? You gonna do the appeal? Now, if you gonna do the appeal, now I'm gonna go to this courtroom and they ain't gonna be happy with me. But if you gonna do the work, I'm willing to be thrown under the bus at why these kids still here and this house isn't licensed within a certain amount of time that it needs to be licensed for.
Mhm.
Because my thought is let DHS do their job.
Yeah.
Like God needs to do his job,
Mhm.
DHS needs to do their job.
I think that's the part that people don't know. They think that once the social workers say no,
That's it.
that's it, and then they
Mhm.
just give up. But there is another process.
Yeah, you can go through a private agency. It
Yeah.
may cost you. It may,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like there may be a little cost and it may cost the county, but you have the right to go
Mhm.
and keep trying. And there's a way that you can ask for the paperwork. Like ask, okay, what was it that made them say no? Can I have the appeal? And DHS usually sends that paperwork. Now let's be very clear. If you know you have a husband in your household that has murder in his background,
Right.
unless you're willing to move your husband out of your household, the answer is going to be no. You may
Right.
be straight, but there are some things that's going to bar you, and it don't make sense to waste people's time if you know you're going to be barred.
Now, they check every child over what age?
I believe it's over 12.
In
And
the
I
hou in the
The
household,
household.
you're
in the
saying?
household,
Yeah.
yes. Yep. Every child over the age of 12 must have a background done on them.
All right, I'm gonna move us on because we can stay on that. What would you say are the top 3 things a family should know to prevent a open child protection case?
Hmm.
Black families.
Send your kids to school. Send them to school. I cannot preach this enough. Stop sending your kids to school smelling like weed, even though it's legal. Be mindful that your cultural language does not transfer over. You tell your kid, I'm gonna beat your ass, and really what that means is I'm about to take your game away.
Right.
Mhm.
Choose different language in this community.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Choose different because language is powerful.
Yeah.
You may not mean I'm really gonna beat you with a belt or broom, but the reality is that the language, its true definition to a mandate reporter is the only thing that matter, not the cultural use of the word. The true definition of it. When you go into these schools, stop going in there acting a fool and talking to these people crazy because they envisioning you talking crazy to your own child like that. They're
That's right.
envisioning you do not have the emotional intelligence to manage yourself, and they're now thinking, well, how you treating your kid at home? They ain't doing nothing but document, baby. They ain't doing nothing but writing it down
Mhm.
and document. Poor emotional intelligence. Didn't have socks on. Hair was a mess. Kid comes to school hungry. They're documenting. You breathe, they're documenting. And if they're not writing it down, they're making a mental note.
What are some things that like, if someone feels like there's something in their file that's wrong or just flat out they feel it's a lie, is there anything that can be done about that, or can their files be changed at all once they're kind of compiled?
Proof.
Okay.
Yes, there's proof. There's the appeal process. So you get a letter of a determination or of no determination. Read the whole letter thoroughly. If the case is closed, request your file. You're going to have to pay for those copies, front and back. I think it's
Mhm.
25 cents a page. It's going to take them about 90 days to get it, depending on how many pieces of paper it is. Read it. Keep a copy of it. And then if you find and do it, mind you, do it within the time where it says appeal it.
Mhm.
Because I have been, even in my own personal life, I know people who was charged and got
Yep.
a determination and they were like, well, this ain't right. I got proof. I got pictures. And then you go through the appeal process and you submit that new documentation and then give them the opportunity to make a decision. But you better have your paperwork together. Have your proof together, have your paperwork together, and don't go off feelings. Don't go off of, well, the social worker said. If it ain't written down, it didn't happen. That's social work 101. If they didn't give it to you written down, it ain't true. And they could mean it all the well they want to. But what matters is that when a county attorney goes to pull their notes, that's what matters. That's the only thing that matters. If they're sweet and kind, that's great for relationship building. But the only thing that matters is a pen and a keyboard.
We tell that to the families we work with. You need to send an email. You need a text. You need to have documentation.
Mm-hmm. Documentation is everything. And it's also important for yourself. Again, we have to remember we are not robots. And let's be
Mhm.
very clear. Black tears are weapons, not tools. Black bodies are weapons, not tools. So you being emotional and upset, depending on the social worker that's sitting in front of you, they may see that your emotions is a weapon against them and their work to protect the child.
Right.
But everybody is supposed to be at the table for the same thing, and that is for the safety of the child. That is for the preservation of the child. And while they are working with the parent, the child is always forefront. It's child protection services, not family protection services. And people need to get that. They need to get that together. It is not about family. Family preservation is about child protection. Child protection is not about family preservation. It is important for a family to be preserved for a child when it is appropriate, but it is not necessary for child protection.
Oh, that's so true. You know, with that being said, um, we all have sit in on so many of these meetings, and of course, the families are upset.
Mhm.
You know, um, they're upset, they're crying, they're angry because they feel like this is unjust that they have lost their children or even have these cases, and you know, some of it is true, some of it is not, and when we're very emotional, right? Just as like we're very emotional, we're loud, we're this, we're that. And it's so hard that when your social workers here, especially, they may be younger, uh, they're white, you know, so they're not used to us raising our voice and being emotional, and then they're taking
Mhm.
it personal. When it's not personal, we're just we have the right and we're angry about what's happening to us and what's happening to our children. And so, what are some tips that can you give parents in that situation? Because I know something as simple as I say, you know, if I'm in a meeting and I tell them if I'm not going to be there, when you feel yourself rising, because it's going to happen,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You need to ask to take a break.
Mhm.
And so, something that simple I've seen have just really helped navigate the situation. But what can because but at the same time, there's a responsibility of the social workers,
Mhm.
right? And the department to know this is culture. We talk with our hands, we talk loud,
Mhm.
we get excited, we whatever. It's not against you. This is just how I've communicated my whole life.
Mhm.
And I haven't learned to just that I have to communicate this way to you right now in order for me to have the best possible outcome for my child. And
Mhm.
especially working with young moms, I see it being so hard to navigate.
Mhm. So two things I would say. And one of the things I tell fathers that I work with, right? When you are in front of the social worker, you are real, not raw. The only time you should be raw is when you are with me or your case manager behind closed doors. Be real, be honest. Keep your name calling down, keep your cussing down, write it down. Be real, do not be raw. because your raw emotions are not necessary in that space.
Yeah.
That's number one. On the flip side of that, social workers are being killed across this country in droves. The number of social workers being killed has risen by easily 15% across this
You're
country.
saying because of angry parents?
Because of
Of
just because angry parents, because they're removing kids. Social workers are the catfish of professional work. We have the least
Mhm.
protection.
Mhm.
You don't have lawyers going in taking it. We don't have social workers don't have the legal right to remove a child without a police officer. Only police can remove a child. So we have to go through the process of getting what is called a police hold. And that comes with having a conversation with an officer and them signing off on the documentation, which therefore give you the authority to remove a child. A social worker just can't walk into a
Right.
school and take a kid. You have to have a police hold that says this social worker, this person, this agency has the authority to remove this child for the purpose of safety. So what does that mean? That means a police officer should be well trained in what is child protection services instead of them just approving and agreeing to whatever a social worker says.
Yeah.
More time should be spent with the social worker and the officer because there's a word that we often forget about in social work, and it's called egregious. What does egregious mean by definition? Death. The state of Minnesota says the egregious harm has to be happening for a child to be removed. Mom being high on meth does not equate egregious harm.
Right.
It could, though.
Right.
It could, but it doesn't guarantee
Right.
egregious harm. That's where active efforts, that's where safety planning, that's where family group decision making meetings, that's where family assessments instead of investigation should be taking place
Right.
versus immediate removal of a
Of a child.
child.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit too, just on some, because I want people to hear this podcast as we're wrapping up with this with some tools,
Mhm.
and I think that that's really important what you talked about when you're in the meetings, when you're in these meetings, when you're in court, you talk about writing things down, also we tell families that we have stress balls, sour candy, and really listen to what they're saying, but listen to what they're not saying.
Mhm.
And then talk and when all possible, have an advocate with you, take an
Mhm.
advocate with you. Um, so those are anything else you think that would be good for someone to know, um, that got an open case?
Yeah, I
What
would
when
say definitely I tell get a 3-ring binder because you're going to get paperwork from your lawyer. You're going to get paperwork from your social worker. You're going to get paperwork from the garden of item. You're going to get the stuff duplicated sent in the mail. Don't throw nothing away. Open it up. If it's too hard for you to read, if you feel like what they're saying is not true, recognize that perspective is true. Your perspective is your truth. However, your child's perspective is their truth. The mandate reporter's perspective is their truth. So document, but also keep everything in a file. Because guess what? Everything they're sending you is already going to be used if you ever have to go to trial.
Good.
Um, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see parents make with CPS cases? You did touch on it a little bit with just the language and
They get
the
laxy-daisy.
yeah.
That's the biggest one. They think they got time to be angry and to be mad. If if it is found and it is court ordered for you to get in therapy, stop fighting that you don't need therapy.
Right.
You don't have time to fight. Everybody needs therapy. Swallow that pill. You ain't crazy, baby. We all struggling out here in these streets. Inflation is whooping all of us. That paperwork to get food stamps is whooping all of us. Do it. Get to it. Get it done. And do it in a way that makes the most sense because you can go and get a psychological evaluation, but if your social worker is not added on as a person who could be what's the word I'm looking for?
A release that they can be spoken to.
That they can be
Release, share
spoken to,
information.
but there's a different word I'm looking for. But
Oh.
basically, you need to make sure your social worker, you sign releases.
Right.
Sign the releases. Go to your visits. Show up to your visits on time and on time.
And get along
Clean,
with the staff.
sober.
Yeah.
And understand you have the right. I'm not saying bow down. I'm saying show up and be real. I'm saying show up for your kids because we all make mistakes. There's no perfect parent in this. We all make mistakes, but show up for your kids in a way that your parents didn't show up for you.
Mhm.
Any final words?
Yeah.
Final words to parents.
Yeah.
Final words to social workers. Final words to the community that's listening.
Community first. We need more foster homes. We need
We need
more
more Black
foster
foster
homes, more
homes.
Yeah.
Black foster homes that are willing to do the work long term. 2-parent, single parent, we need more foster homes. Number one,
Mhm.
to community. Number two, to my families, to our families, get busy and stay out the way because the political ring will eat you up. You're not
Mhm.
ready. Be aware before you dare. Stop leaving your kids home alone. That is grounds for removal. Stop. Stop asking your kids to cook because you're tired. Because the moment they burn themselves, that's ground for removal. What was the other thing? Community,
To social
families,
workers.
Mhm.
social workers. This is your job, not your life. You cannot take this job home. And if you don't know what it is to be a parent, take some parenting classes. Because if you are a person who is in a position that can make decisions about a parent and you're going into their home and you're judging them because they don't have sheets on the bed or they have a dirty diaper on the floor or they have less food in their household, be honest with yourself and go take a class because you're comparing that child's life to your life. And let's be very clear, if you have issues with your fathers, if you're a person who don't like Black and brown bodies, move around
Mhm.
because you are a danger to us. Move around. We don't need capes. We need fathers and we need mothers. We need foster homes. We don't need capes.
That was so
So good.
good. And I just so agree with. I think it's important when it comes to culture to educate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Is your responsibility as a social worker to educate yourself about other people's culture, and don't come in with all the assumptions and ask the questions.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But because information really is power, and I think a lot of times it's just a cultural difference. And don't take it personal. It's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's about families fighting for their children.
And that's the word though. Like you just hit it.
That they have to
Families are
fight.
fighting for their children. Families are fighting for their family and their children, while social workers are merely fighting for the children.
Mhm.
They're fighting against each other.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for so
You're
much. It's been a
welcome.
great conversation. Thanks for being with us today. If something spoke to you, please share this with a friend who you think could really benefit from this episode. And remember, to help our show grow and reach more people just like you, make sure to follow the show and leave a 5-star review. And if you want to continue to have critical and courageous conversations, well, then we'll see you in the next episode.